This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. This is my friend Mateo, and he's really good at soccer, or football, whatever you want to call it. He's really good at it. He's also really good at teaching other people how to play it. He trains tons of people, and he also sets up tournaments. These tournaments are often just like his trainings, where they're small groups or one-on-one, and he asked me to make something for one of his upcoming Panna tournaments. But I didn't know what that meant. Well, it turns out that Panna is basically one-on-one soccer in a little tiny court, and he asked if I could make the court for one of his tournaments. And I had to look it up because I didn't know what that looked like. It turns out that there's several different shapes that you can use for this court, but he decided he wanted a hexagon. So basically it's just a hexagonal wall where you can bounce the ball around and try to score in one of two goals. He wanted these walls to be about 3 feet tall, and that was really about all the guidance I got. I need a hexagon with 3-foot walls, 2 goals, and that's it. But there are a couple of other things that it needs. He wants it to be able to be broken down, panel by panel, and then stored away somewhere. So each panel has to be able to be carried by 1 or maybe 2 people. They need to lay flat, except for the goals, obviously. But then even the pin itself, you have to be able to get in and out of it, so it's gonna need a door. So here's what we need. A court that is shaped like a hexagon, made of plywood that's 3 feet tall. 2 of those sides have to have goals, 1 has to have a door, and 3 of them are just flat. I don't have a plan for all that, but we can definitely start with the flat ones. The 3 basic walls are done, and the other 3 walls are actually pretty basic too, except they just have holes in them, especially the 2 with the goals. They've just got big sections cut out of them to put the goal behind. Unfortunately, I'm beginning to question my choice in plywood. I was trying to keep budget in mind, and I needed 6 sheets of plywood, so I bought this stuff that's like B or C grade. It's got a bunch of knots in it, but only one side of it really matters. Unfortunately, it's not flat. I got 1/2-inch plywood just to cut the cost down and the weight down, because each one of these panels is gonna have to be picked up and moved. I also got 2x2s instead of 2x4s to try to cut down the weight, but those 2 things together are just making for something that's not incredibly sturdy. I don't think this is gonna be an issue at all for the 3 basic panels, because they're just panels, but the other 3, I'm gonna be removing big areas, which is just gonna make them more floppy. So I may have to come back on those and reinforce the structure on the back side, but I won't really know until I make one, so I'm gonna go ahead and make the goal walls. Gotta figure out how to lay out this frame on the underside of this to try to stop it from twisting and bending as much as possible. It's not gonna bend this way as much as it's gonna bend like this. And I gotta do it upside down. So I just gotta figure it out first. It's actually sturdier than I thought. That's cool. This video is sponsored by SimpliSafe, which is awesome because I've been using SimpliSafe to secure my home for at least 10 years, maybe longer. And in those 10 years, they've always had cameras and door locks and glass break sensors and water sensors and smoke detectors and 24/7 monitoring. And all of those things go together to help let you know if anything bad happens at your house. But now they've added something that can actually stop bad things from happening, and it's called ActiveGuard. With ActiveGuard, their monitoring agents can react in real time to suspicious activity outside your house. So if there's somebody walking up that shouldn't be there, the agents can talk to them through your cameras. They can turn the lights on and off and turn on the sirens. And in some cases, they could even call the police. And this is all before anything actually happens to your home, which is pretty amazing. Now, of course, there are other people that come to your house that you want to be there, and they've got an AI technology that can recognize friends and family and people that you're good with coming in and out of your house. ActiveGuard is just another really cool way that Simply Safe helps you secure your home and your valuables and the people that you love. And I think it's really, really cool. The way you get started is go to simplysafe.com/ILTMS, and then you build out a system that works specifically for your home. You pick the cameras that you need, the door locks, all of the sensors, and using that code, you're gonna get 50% off the entire system. Then the whole system shows up at your house in a box, and you can install every single one of those things yourself. Trust me, it's super easy to do to get everything in place, and then once it's in place, you can sign up for 24/7 monitoring for about $1 a day. And you probably won't want to, but if you needed to, you can cancel at any time. You don't have any contract for monitoring, but it's a really good idea and a great price. They've also got a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, so if you're not happy with the system, you can get your money back, although I don't think that's gonna happen. SimpliSafe has been voted the best home security system for 5 years in a row. So don't delay, just go to simplysafe.com/ILTMS and customize a system just for you. You'll be happy you did. Big thanks to SimpliSafe for sponsoring this video. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. The panel and the door are finished. Now, believe it or not, I've really just finished the easy part. And that's not to say that the rest of it is necessarily hard, but it's definitely more unknown because it's time for hardware. I have to admit, I did design the walls and the door and the goals in Fusion, and I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I could figure out how much material to get, so I knew how much it was gonna cost. But more importantly, I was able to show Matteo a render of the entire thing so he could sign off on it and approve it. I've told you before, but we do have an online course called Fusion for Makers where we teach people how to use Fusion. I'll link it down below if you want to check it out, and there'll be a discount code. Back to the hardware. Now, the reason I brought up Fusion was because I modeled the framing and the walls and the size of the door and all that stuff. But I didn't model the hardware because I didn't know what I was gonna use. Like I often do, I spent a while on Amazon just looking through different types of hardware to try to figure out what I was gonna use. And I found some really cool stuff, some of which I've used before, like these little latches. You pull this little thing back and it releases that pin, but it's spring loaded, so it'll always close itself back. This is gonna be really good for letting things close automatically, like the door. But then I was also trying to figure out, how do I get all of these panels to connect together in the corners at an angle, but also be able to come apart easily? And I found these cool hinges that separate. Unfortunately, they're a little hard to get apart. And because of that, these are not gonna work, so I have stuff to return. But I also found things like this, which is a nice hinge that you can put on the door, and then they have a tensioner on them that you can tighten, so they will auto close. Once the door opens and somebody lets go of it, it's gonna try to close itself. I think that'll be handy in this case. And thinking about the doors, I also found these. They're little like spring-loaded ball catches. They have a little plate like a normal doorknob does, and when these things slide in, they're gonna snap into that little detent in this plate and hold it closed. That way there's no doorknob to worry about, there's nothing sticking on the inside of the play area. It just will close itself and stay there. We do have everything we need to get the door on and latching, so let's give it a shot. Not light. Now, since I've got to take that door off and trim it down a little bit, I may as well go ahead and figure out how much space I need to add for this thing, because both of these pieces have to fit on the inside of that. Now, luckily, this is threaded, so you can back the little ball part out pretty far. But then, of course, you just have to cut a hole deep enough in the door for this part. It actually works really well, except it can go past it a little bit, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way to stop that from happening. I don't want to put anything up here that's sticking out on either the frame or the door, because it might hurt somebody, get caught on clothes, any of that. But I think I could probably just put a little tab off the bottom that hangs over and hits this bottom plate when it tries to close, I think. right, let's see if that works. Perfect. The door is done, which means we can put this panel away and get one of the other walls because it's time to make the goals. Now these goals could be anything. I mean, the wall has a hole in it, so technically it already is a goal, but Mateo asked me to make some goals to fit on the back of these that are made out of wood. So here's the general idea. Basically, we're just gonna make some triangles out of 2x4s and just pocket hole those together. And then I'm gonna make one of those for each side of the goal and then string some 2x4s in between them to make sure that none of the openings anywhere along this are big enough for a soccer ball to pass through. The goals will be built separately, but then pushed up to this opening in the sidewall and latched in place during play. Haven't figured the latch out yet, but we'll get there. Now, quickly in my head, when I was on Amazon, I had assumed that this latch that I showed you earlier would be a good latch for holding these two pieces together. But the more I look at it, it actually won't work. These are made to be able to pass by each other and then latch in place when that's there. When you pull this little piece back, it pulls back the pin, allowing these two pieces to be able to move past each other on this plane. Unfortunately, this plane is not the same as this plane, and that's kind of what I need for this case, so I'm gonna have to find something else. But these are really cool either way. Well, that's pretty simple, and even a small ball, this is a size 4, is not gonna fit through there, but it will fit through here, so we also have to close up the ends. Standing here looking at this, and I realized that it actually might not completely work. One of the things about soccer is that the ball has to completely cross the line to be out of bounds or in the goal. And because of this piece right here, this ball can't ever actually go all the way in if it's in the top. In the bottom, it's just fine. Now, this is a game for kids. It probably doesn't matter, but worst case, we can take out these crossbars and just put a net around this outer frame, and that'll probably work. I'm just gonna have to ask Mateo. So the goal fits the opening in the wall, which is fantastic. I still gotta figure out the latch to attach these together, and I have an idea, but I'm gonna wait till after I sand and paint all this anyway, so we'll get to that later. Luckily, I did order some replacement soccer nets. So if he decides that he wants a net instead of these bars, I got it covered. Speaking of painting and sanding, I have a lot of painting and sanding to do. The painting is not quite done. I still have to paint the goals and a couple of other pieces, but overall, it's looking pretty good. Speaking of the goals, I was able to modify them just a little bit. Instead of a 45-degree on the back, I kicked it back a little bit so that there's a horizontal piece, making the whole thing deeper. It's gonna work out great, and there's no net to mess with. But I'm not gonna make you watch me paint anymore. We're gonna load all this stuff up and take it to the facility so we can put it together, which is gonna be possible because of this. This thing is a hexagon, which means all of the inside angles are 60 degrees, and I was able to find a 60-degree bracket that's super beefy on Amazon. I got enough of these to put one at the top and one at the bottom on each one of the joints where the panels come together. The hole in this is actually pretty big, and so we're gonna use a lag bolt with a washer in each one of these holes. And that bolt has a hex head on it, which means we just need a socket to be able to assemble and disassemble this entire thing. The painting is finally all finished, which is really exciting for me, but next up I need to attach these brackets. Now, I want to save some time when I'm putting this thing together on site, so I'm going to go ahead and put the brackets on one side of each panel so that they'll overlap all the way around and I can just put in the final screws and it'll be done. Along with that, I don't want the panels to have to be in any particular order, so I want the hole spacing, the location of these to be exactly the same across all 6 panels. So, we're gonna make a jig. Here's what I'm talking about. This bracket needs to go about right there, and then another wall will come slide in and be locked in right there with 2 lag bolts. They're gonna go in right here and right here. So that means I need this bolt hole and this bolt hole to be exactly the same on this bracket and the one below it and every other panel. Now, of course, you could make a really simple jig with a piece of wood here and a hole in it, another piece of wood here to make sure that it's aligned with the top, another piece of wood here that's aligned with the outside edge, and then you could drill that hole. But then you have to make one for the bottom because this piece is on the other side. I've got a 3D printer, so let's do that. After getting the whole court set up, the only thing I had to come back and do was add another latch to the outside of the door because those kids were kicking the ball really, really hard. But speaking of the kids, everybody had a great time. The tournament went super well and you could just see how much fun all of the kids were having, and that made me super happy. I learned about a new sport and a bunch of kids got to do something really cool and they had a fun time doing it, so I called this a win. Thanks for hanging out with me on this one. I'll catch you next time. But there are a couple of other needs that it has, and I forgot what they were. So here's what we need. Okay, I found these cool hinges. Oh, these are the wrong, those are the wrong hinges. And a little plate, just like a door knob has.